Hello, one and all. I'm Bill Davis, and welcome to our daily show where we answer your tech questions live 7 days a week. Alexander Knight in Port Coquitlam, British Columbia, Canada is our reader today. Alexander, what's our first question?
First question this morning is from Craig Kadoki. I've put DVS on two M4 minis at work last week. Everything working okay so far, and I no longer see the notice on the Audinate site about the latest macOS. Has anyone else tried it?
And we're turning right back around to Alexander for our first answer. Alexander.
Yeah, so the thing is, macOS Sequoia is not officially supported by Audinate, which means use at your own peril. Ask me how I know. So the M4 Mac Mini, I bought one of them, and it shipped with macOS 15.1, and everything was working fine with DVS. And then the moment Apple released 15.2, I patched it, and everything broke. So it just flat out will not work. None of the DVS software itself, the driver, keeps crashing, and it just does not work reliably. So obviously you can't downgrade. So the only way around that, and I bought one of these to use it, is to buy a piece of Dante hardware, like one of these Dante Avio adapters. And what I ended up getting was the 2-channel USB interface version. So this basically, it's class compliant, meaning it requires no drivers. So you just plug it in over USB, then you've got your Ethernet jack on the other side, and that will get around your hardware problems. Obviously, you got to spend money to make that work, but I feel your pain. If you run into any issues, just be aware. If you haven't patched to 15.2, don't do it, because it's going to break it.
You're Nigel DeSalle.
Yeah, ditto on all of that. Plus the fact I'm looking at the Dante site on my other system, and it says it is being tested, do not use it. So Dante Audinate have not cleared Sonoma yet. And by the way, what did they do to the control software, the controller? Since they rewrote it, I upgraded it to and it uses Chromium Helper or something. It looks very nice, but it's got to be the slowest hogging thing they've ever done. So that's not a great experience either.
Alex Lindsay.
Yeah, just as a reminder that whether it's Sequoia or not, you absolutely always have to have a Dante device that has the hardware chip in it to run it effectively. So it will never be, you should never consider Dante, or you should never consider Dante to be stable without one piece of hardware that has the chip in it. To clock it. Otherwise, if you just use DVS between computers, it'll always, doesn't matter what operating system you're on, it'll always be problematic.
That sounds like the old days of time code. And if you didn't have Blackburst correcting your whole facility, it all
well, it's
work.
Just that they use that chip to time everything, and if they don't have one of those chips in the system, it'll slide, and all kinds of bad things will happen.
Yeah, it makes sense. Next question.
Aaron Huslich in Durham, North Carolina is asking, what are the main costs that people are incurring in cloud productions? Bandwidth, GPUs?
You happen to have one of the world's experts in it right now here.
I don't know if I'm the world expert in cloud
I think you're among them.
So what I would say, and we have people in, I say that very carefully because we have people in our group that are definitely the cloud experts. It's not me.
Here.
But what I will say is that it depends. So that's the technical term for that. That's the technical answer. It depends on what you're doing. If it can be bandwidth, if you are distributing to a lot of people. So if you decide your cloud production is going to be streamed to lots of locations and streamed to, or even you're using CloudFront and delivering it as a CDN, then it's going to be your bandwidth. It can be bandwidth. It's your egress. Of course, ingress I don't think costs anything, but egress does. So egress going out is what's going to cost you primarily in AWS. And then of course it's CPUs, GPUs, how long you have them up there, how big they are, those types of things. And then it can be storage as well, depending on what you're doing. So those are some of the big costs there.
Yeah, and no one person may know it all, but I will say that I've been so impressed because the Office Hours community at large, including our back-end crew, which is amazing, and the friends that the show has made over the years, this is such a brain trust for this. So thank you for asking the question, Aaron, and if anybody else has any questions about that stuff, this is the place you want to come in and ask them. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael's asking, the Golden Globes graphic looks very impressive. How would the graphics operator position the 3D object precisely over where the person is sitting? Would that be done in the UE5/Unity editor or with a specific front end?
Alex, you familiar with the Golden Globes?
I actually watched a little bit later. I didn't watch the actual broadcast. I will say there's some crow that I need to eat. I'm gonna fry it up nicely. Is that when they said that Nikki Glaser was going to host it, all I thought was there is no one that would make me more uncomfortable. I thought that what was the guy Gervais? I thought
Ricky Gervais. Yeah.
Ricky Gervais, I thought would be the person that would make me the most uncomfortable to watch a show ever. And then when they announced Nikki, I was like, oh, they found someone more uncomfortable to watch, for me. And I just, I was like, there's no way I'm watching that show. Like, there's no way I'm going to sit through that show. I have to say that the open popped up in my YouTube feed or whatever. And Nikki, her open, number one, was not as uncomfortable as I expected. And number two, was probably the funniest open I have seen in an award show in a decade. It was just, she's
getting huge kudos.
She crushed it, crushed it, and it was I think it was just the right level of roasting without, and she's not known for that. She's usually known to turning it not to 11, but to like 90, when they put her in a roast, and somehow she was able to pull that back and do just such a great job, and made me want to watch more of it. So I watched a bunch of little bits and pieces, but she was exceptional at it, which I did not expect. Now, to get back to the question, Douglas asked, now, I don't know, I didn't watch the show. If you're talking about something different than this, I don't know what the answer is, but this is, if you're talking about where they put, let's see here, hold on, I got the wrong, let's see, let's try this again. There we go. So if you're talking about this graphic, I am almost certain that graphic was placed there by an LED wall. So I'm pretty sure that this is actually there, because you can see a little bit of the moray here. And when you scroll back and forth, you see it tracking. And that would be, if they didn't do it with an LED wall, they were absolutely nutty. So I think that's actually a physical, I think these 3D elements here are rendered. And they match into this, and I think it was, we'll talk about it later. There's other questions we don't want to talk about the production because I think there's other questions about the production, but overall, I think if this is what you're talking about, then that's how that, I think it was just an LED wall that was up there. And yeah, we'll talk about the rest of the framing and everything else in another question.
And just a note, I saw an interview with her, ahead of it was an interview looking back. It was after the show, but she talked about rehearsing that opening on the road in front of audiences over and over. And if there's not a single lesson that we've learned from office hours, prepare.
She was obviously not reading heavily, and again, she really
knew it. She knew exactly what she was doing.
I just felt like the tone was just right. Like it was a very. Anyway, I don't know.
Yeah, performance, delivery, everything. Everybody is giving her a lot of praise, and I think well-deserved because she put the work in. All right, next question.
Paul Vahus in Austin, Texas. What's a good USB cable tester?
Alexander Knight, help us out.
Yeah, so I've been looking at this one lately, and there's lots of brands. I think they all kind of white label this thing, but FNIRSI, I'm not sure how you would say that. Anyways, this one supports USB Type A, Type C, supports all the various power delivery formats as well, and it has a nice little LCD screen on the front. You can get a good readout of the voltages and whether or not it meets the specifications. So it's about $60 US for you, Paul, and if you clip the $5 coupon there, you get a bit of a discount there. So I would have a look at that one.
Alexander, do you own one of those? And I'm just curious as to how bright the display is. That's the one issue I've had with small type displays of that type, is that sometimes it can be hard to read in brighter conditions.
It's actually, I don't know, like nits-wise what it is, but it seems to have, like for me at least, I'm not using it out in the field, but it's quite bright.
Okay, so the display hasn't been a problem. That's good to hear. Alex, Lindsay.
And because you didn't ask, you said a good cable tester and you didn't give us a price. Mickey was kind enough to post us the one that you really should get. If money is no object, this is the advanced cable tester version 2 for a inexpensive $15,000. So when it actually matters, Paul, you didn't, again, if you got to give us price ranges or we're going to give you the best.
Slightly less scary than pricing it in rupees, I think.
Yeah, exactly.
Next question.
This one's from the QR code. Gene J. Anthony in Skokie, Illinois. What do you think the iPhone will be on the list of, or when do you think the iPhone will be on the list of cameras supported for the Tilta Nano 2? Fully BMPCC 4K, 6K, 6K Pro, partially Sony FX3, A7S3, A7R5, ZV-E10, ZV-E10, and Canon R7.
Ooh, it's a lot of numbers and letters. Alex, can you help?
Never. It's never going to be listed. No, I can't get it to work. So like I have two of them, and I still couldn't get. I thought it was maybe the one I got. They are. They're never going to get, because it's not. It's working for some people and not other people. I don't think it's ever going to get approved.
But you say it is working for some people.
Some people, but not others. But when that happens, that means that you can use it, but you're not going to get on the list.
Yeah, your configuration is too iffy. Yeah. Interesting. Next question.
Jack Cannon in Phoenix, Arizona. I mostly film in the desert. There's an Arctic blast happening on the East Coast. What do I need to worry about for filming in snow for my documentary? 6 of my filming locations are outdoors at monuments. What do I need to be concerned about?
Jesse Kester is going to start off with help. Jesse?
If you're used to filming out in the desert, you're probably used to equipment overheating. That's not going to be a problem in a blizzard. What will be a problem is battery performance will plummet. Also, the performance of your fingers will probably plummet. So keep both of those as warm as you can.
Alex Lindsay.
Yeah, the biggest problem that we tend to get into is moisture in the lens, moisture in other things like that, that'll either freeze or going in and out of warm areas to cold areas. So when there's just a lot of delta, the lenses do all kinds of, they can fog, they can fog and then freeze. They can do a lot of things, and that fogging and freezing can actually damage the lens. So you have to be very careful with. One of the things to think about is you want to see what they're going to do in that environment. You also, oftentimes we keep them in desiccants. So we keep them in a box that's keeping them very dry to make sure that they're there. And then, you want to see what they look like once they've equalized. Mickey points out that you want to use high quality cables. Cheap cables will get brittle in the extreme cold. Bring lots of spares. Yeah, cables tend to be, if you're in a really, really cold, your cables are going to tend to become a little bit more brittle, and if they're not high quality, they will show it. So those are the things that I think that when I'm thinking about cold, batteries, cables, and lenses are the things that come up. And then you want to look at, I don't know how cold it's going to get. I know that, both batteries, and we've had some issues where equipment doesn't work the way we expect it to when we get below -20 Fahrenheit. So so you want to look at the specs that the hardware has. And then Francis Fry suggested hot hand warmers that you can insert. These are the little shakeable ones that you can put in there. Although if you really want to have the real country experience, they still sell those kerosene ones that we used to, when I grew up, we had those, you put kerosene.
Ones that look like big Zippo lighters?
Yeah, we used to put kerosene on fire in our pockets. I just want to make sure you're clear. That's the way we rolled. So so you can still get them. They're really cool. And they everything, all your clothes will smell like you were out in the cold. Because they'll smell like kerosene. No matter what you do, it's going to smell a little like kerosene everywhere. So those are some things to think about. Don't underestimate, there's a Swedish saying that is really important because you're coming from the desert and going into the cold, is there is no bad weather, just bad clothing. Like in the Swedes say this. I've heard of multiple Swedes will say that. And you just want to really think about, remember, since you're coming from the desert, layers are your friend as an operator. It's not thick things; it's lots of layers because they create more sections of warm air. And so you want to think about t-shirt, thermal, and then another sometimes another thermal and a sweater. And it's your core temperature that you really will affect your hands more than the gloves. So having 4 or 5 layers on around your chest will definitely. I grew up spending a lot of time in the cold, and so and obviously keeping your head warm is important. So those are the kind of things. And then a good pair of shoes that are well insulated, that are rated for cold. definitely makes a difference. So just some things to think about. And also, here's the last tip. Eddie Bauer sells jeans that have they have it's like sweats on the inside. Like it's a whole nother layer, and it's like
Fleece
wearing sweats,
line
but
jeans.
they fleece line jeans, and they are the best. You know, like so anyway, so like that's all I got to say.
Yeah, the one thing that I did, I had to shoot snow. Oh gosh, what are the dog sleds? I had to shoot a whole dog sled thing, and I was up in the middle of the top of Aspen, Colorado, and somebody had recommended they made gloves that have a mitten layer over the top of them, and you can peel back the fingers so that you were able to pull off the mitten part, have your fingers to be able to touch small controls, and then cover them back up real quick. I found those really nice. I don't know if they still make them, but it was a great thing.
Also, you until you've done it for a while, you will underestimate the power of a face mask. You know, so like neoprene ones that go over your face that open up under your nose and everything else. It can, and I don't know how cold you're going to go shooting in, but when you get into the below 5 or 10 degrees Fahrenheit, things start to become, more uncomfortable, and definitely you're in the negative Fahrenheit numbers, then you just have to think about it, because you do have a certain amount of time to solve things if things get really cold.
And also remember, if you're not completely in frozen weather, you can get into slushy conditions. And sometimes I've been in some place where it's snowing now and then it's raining later. So do give some thought to your water protocol at the same time you're thinking about snow.
And again, we're just worried because we have desert folk going into the winter, into the winter, and we're just worried about you. We're worried about you, Jack, because there's a lot of things that you won't know. Just because you don't see snow on the road doesn't mean it's not slippery. That's the last thing I'll say.
Oh, Phoenix. Jack lives in Phoenix. Phoenix is the worst because all the tires all lose microparticles, and then the first time it rains, it becomes a giant slip and slide, and all the roads in Phoenix are impossible to stop on.
Yeah, there's a thing. There's a thing that your car should have. It's called studs. They should be in the tires. Yeah.
All right. Hopefully, we've given you enough information on that, Jack. But we're all sympathetic because a lot of us have gone through this process. You'll be fine. You'll be fine. You'll learn a lot this time for next time, but just go have fun. And every time you go out and shoot, make sure you write down your notes and think about what you're going to do the next time you do it. Next question.
Tony Mobley in Noonan, Georgia is asking, now that we have the powerful M4 Max, is it time to revisit OBS for low cost or small production events?
Alex, what do you think?
I installed it actually over the weekend. Last night, I installed it on 2 computers, and I'm actually pretty impressed with OBS. I mean, I haven't used it in years. I mean, it's been kind of like a no, thank you. And I don't know if I do production in it yet. The reason I have it is because I need to test 120 frames per second. I need to be able to play out 120 frames per second from a computer, and I need to be able to play 120% and then see that it came out of the computer at 120 frames a second. So I had to do a couple things, and I'll just kind of extend on this question. I had to buy this. This is a RGB link, and this has just HDMI in, but it's built for gamers. And so at 1080, it'll do 4K 60, but at 1080p, it will do up to 240 frames a second. And so 120 being kind of casual for this little piece of this. It's a heavy box. In the pre-show, we determined, Mickey suggested that this is probably, the whole box is probably heat sink. So it probably gets pretty warm. Anyway, but one of the things that OBS lets you do is arbitrarily, define the output frame rate. And so I was able to go out of an M4 into this, and the M4 was doing 120 frames a second. Going into this, and what I did is I had just a counter that runs at 120 frames a second. And so I'm able to, I built the counter in Motion, which is the only thing I could find that would do 120 frames a second. So Resolve and Final Cut are like 59.94, or 60, but they don't know what. And even Motion says 120, but only for export. Like I can't do anything with it. And so we were able to export a counter that did 120 frames a second. Did find some bugs in Motion when we did that, because I think I might be the first one to do it. Anyway, so I opened it up, and the interface was more impressive than I thought. I still probably there's Jeremy Murray and Mickey agree that it's not reliable on Macs. so I don't know that. I don't know if that's changed or not, but it had more features than I remember it the last time I looked at it. But I don't. I think I would approach it very gingerly, I think would be the word.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael is asking, mimoLive has their own mimoCall conferencing technology for bringing in remote contributors. With mimoLive's Zoom integration, could you see mimoCall being deprecated?
And Alexander Knight's going to start us off. Alexander?
This is just one person's opinion that uses mimoLive. I have no inside knowledge. I've never used it. Obviously, everyone knows that Zoom is the primary conferencing software that everybody uses. Obviously, there's a smaller percentage of people in organizations using Teams. I took a look at mimoCall, and it actually still has some nice features. So first of all, let's have a look at it. Actually, here is, and I assume it's probably some kind of WebRTC based solution here. But one of the big things I noticed that stood out to me, in addition to some of the cool data that you actually get back from each individual here, you see a screenshot so you can see the bandwidth consumption from each participant and that kind of stuff that's integrated. I kind of wish this was actually part of the Zoom API so you could easily see this without digging into the client settings. But it offers organizations complete white labeling and branding. So if that matters to you, that's a feature that it does. So custom skinning. And also the other thing that it offers is it's not a subscription. It's free. It doesn't cost anything. So if that's also important to you and you're working with a low budget and you've already got mimoLive, well, it's absolutely free. So that is certainly something you could test and see if it works well for you.
And Alex?
Yeah, I have used it in the past, and I was not, with all the call systems that were before Zoom, did not find them to be as stable as I'd like. so that's always been the challenge. WebRTC is difficult, and it was always it's always been more challenging. So it has a lot of those tools. A lot of times we just found that it depended on the person on the other end. It's not that the software itself was unstable; it's that traversing complex networks is something that Zoom is exceptional at, and on the far end, and almost anything else is not as adept to, just because they don't have the same engineering resources. And so that's the challenge. It's that sometimes it worked great and sometimes it did not work great. The hard part is that you kind of need it to work great all the time if you're going to use it for a show.
Let's go to the next question.
Paul Valhus in Austin, Texas. What's the most stable monopod?
Ooh, Nigel Dessau is going to help us out. Nigel?
Well, okay, so I don't know about the most stable, but I can tell you the one I acquired over the holidays was this, which is the Cobra 3 Strike monopod from iFootage. And I got it with the head, which is called the K5S. And there was a very good deal at Christmas where these were $300 combined. They're now $450. And my Sony A7 IV, my 24-70 lens, and the teleprompter is actually sitting on this monopod because the legs expand and it's been rock solid. So I can recommend that, but I couldn't promise you it's the most stable one in the world ever because I have not done unlimited tests.
Alex Lindsay.
Yeah, the one that I use that I think Mickey also suggested is the Manfrotto Pro. I think it's the let's see. I'm trying to find the Manfrotto X Pro Monopod Plus. Make sure you get the feet with it. Mickey suggests, yeah, that would be useful if you're going to use it there. But that's a pretty solid monopod that I've used for many years at this point.
And I'll weigh in a little bit on this. I find it depends on which camera I'm shooting. If you only shoot one camera, get one that's the appropriate size and heft for that. I actually use 3 different ones. I have an old Bogan that's very heavy, and for any large camera like my 5D Mark II or even if I'm shooting on the Blackmagic Cinema camera, more weight balances that better. On the other end of the spectrum, I do a lot of shooting now with my iPhone. And I found that almost all of those more rigged out monopods are too heavy to get me what I want, which is just something to get high shots, low shots, and if I hold it up at the top, it counterweighs for stability. On the iPhone, there's such good stabilization already built in that I'm actually using a literally $10 Amazon monopod. It clips to it all the time using those little hawk locks that I love from Small Rig. And that is such a lightweight rig, but gives me all the benefits of a monopod with almost no weight. And it collapses really small, so I can literally toss it on my belt with a clip. And if I'm handheld shooting, so I just always think it's a good idea to match whatever camera support you're using to the weight and heft of the camera you're using. And so I use all three of those at various times for various cameras. Next question.
From the QR code, G&J Anthony in Skokie, Illinois, Amazon discontinued the ability to get a record of all your transactions in CSV, etc. So how would you use AI or data scraping to extract a couple of decades of your order history?
Alex, do you have some suggestions?
If we figure that out, we'll let you know. It's a huge pain in the neck to have. I think that the CSV is now, they took it out and they make it available to people who have businesses. So if you have I think that the part of this was, I think that they want to push you. And the thing that I've definitely learned about Amazon is they like to manipulate behavior. I see it mostly at Whole Foods, but they do like to take things away from you or move you around a little bit so that it's easier for them. And so I think that this has to do with them trying to move more people into the business stuff. So I think the business is able to get CSV, and if you have a business account, you can get CSVs. I think as an individual, they took it away. And
Next
it's super
question.
annoying as someone who had to do it for years. Oh, by the way, and one more thing. The question, I was inaccurate in the question about the graphics. This is what was being asked for. Robert put it up so that I could see it here. So this is the graphic. So it was pointing to where they were. So you saw a close-up of the graphic there. I guess it tracks with it to do it. Now, the tracking is most likely a pan and tilt. So it's probably not something that's moving. So pan and tilt is easy because if you put it on its node, it means that you know where everything's going to be, and it's not going to slide. It's kind of how they used to do the first line, the first down line in football. And so that pan and tilt, so it probably can float around without anything sliding because there's not a parallax shift. And then you would have, they know where everyone's going to sit because they gave them they gave them little cards on their table. So they have the location. So it's just a matter of building that map out. It could be done in Unreal Engine. It could be done in a lot of different things. Unreal Engine, I can't tell from this compression, but it does look like there's a little bit of aliasing here on the edges. So that would tell me that they're using some kind of real-time engine, most likely Unreal. That's kind of indicative of real-time graphics.
And for those of you who are excited to get into the question queues here, don't forget, you can just go to askofficehours.global and put in your questions. The regular Mukana system is great because everybody can vote those questions up or down, and that's what drives our run of show, and the amount of time we spend on each question is exactly that. So once again, remember to head for askofficehours.global to get into the system, and hopefully we will get to your question quickly. Let's get to our next question.
Douglas Carmichael asks, Bill, you mentioned the Apple Managed Color Pipeline extending iOS, iPadOS devices. Have you noticed a difference in color reproduction on the Pro versions of devices versus the lower end models?
No, not really. Apple did this back with OS X when they first came out with it. They created this thing that I've always colloquially referred to as the Apple Managed Color Pipeline, and I think that's technically what it is. As a matter of fact, I was looking it up. There's a huge white paper. Apple's developer conference every year, they do these technical sessions, and everybody now has access to them. You don't have to be a developer. And if you go in and look at Apple Color Pipeline or Color Science, you'll find a whole bunch of versions of this. The great thing about their Managed Color Pipeline is they've set these standards for how color is handled throughout all Apple's software plus all the devices. And Apple devices are so popular that whether it's an iPad or a Mac or a laptop or whatever, the way it handles color, particularly the way it manages color throughout the pipeline, is consistent through everything, which is why, as an individual, I always do at least one good check on an iPad or a modern iPhone to make sure that the color that the audience will see is the color I expect it to be. Because of this pipeline, I know that if I see it on my iPhone here, anybody else around the world watching it on an iPhone will get the same color reproduction. If you're really interested, I would really highly recommend you go to the Apple developer site. Again, anyone can have access to it, and read through what they do with managed color and how it works throughout the entire Apple ecosystem. And I know there are similar things for other developers other than Apple, but I think they really nailed this. And I highly recommend you to, if you're interested in color fidelity, it along with traditional color tools like all the scopes that we always are recommending here, that's how you get to consistency now that the broadcast system is not the biggest game in town. Once upon a time, the broadcast system, you got it right for broadcast. That's kind of gone away. And now what's important is getting it right in front of people, and most people are on some sort of personal device now. Let's go to the next question.
Paul Valhus in Austin, Texas. It's Business Monday and a new year. Would FreshBooks for invoices, Quicken for general accounting, and Google Sheets be your best tools to account for your 2024 production year?
You know, this is going to be a very personal thing, and it depends on your business circumstances. I mean, if you're doing it all yourself, some of the consumer-grade tools, the QuickBooks and things like that, make sense. Often, when you get up to the next level and you're working with an accountant, you want to get them involved in making a decision because they're going to be giving you those kind of things. So that's what I would suggest for you. Talk to whomever you're using for your major accounting and work with something they want you to work with. Let's go to the next question.
From the QR code, Gene J. Anthony in Skokie, Illinois. We are looking to finance our own line of gravies based around the 14 most important things. As media professionals, how would you do this? How would you make the money and promote this, and who with? Do we need celebrity?
Gravies. I don't think I've ever expected a question quite like
saw that coming.
Yeah. Well, boy, we could have a lot of discussions. White gravy, brown gravy.
I think I think in a more general question, how do you promote a product with media? I think is we'll kind of back up a little bit based on that. I think that the thing that you sounds like you have a great gravy that you've thought through. So getting the product right first is, I think, probably the most important thing. And then, it's how do you build a community around people who like gravy? So it's not promoting the gravy itself. It's really like, how do you serve the community? This is how I approach it anyway. How do you serve the community that would want gravy? So it's really about cooking the things that need gravy. But it could be anything. If you think about how do you use media for a product, how do you use media to serve the community? Think about the wider community. If they like the product that you're trying to sell, or if you think that they're the target market. So there's a little bit of market research of how big is that market. And again, this is not necessarily just for gravy. Gravy is good context. But if you're thinking about how to promote a product, how do you get out there and serve that product? In many ways, when I started my first product release, which was the 3D Toolkit, and this is 25 years ago, or almost 25 years ago. What I did is I started long before I had the product ready. So I wasn't promoting the product. I just did little what are called attention to details, which were just like I just highlighted things that you could see in images for 3D artists. And I built some tutorials for 3D artists and put them on my website. And I started building up a mailing list of people who were interested in watching those. And I did that for months before I released the product. And when I released the product, we made about $250,000 in a week. But it wasn't that we made $250,000 in a week. We made $250,000 over 3 months of building content that was serving the market that I had identified would want to see that. And many people were just buying the product. They literally told us they were buying the product so that we would keep on making the videos. so like they didn't care about the product itself. So anyway, so it's it can you think about how do you serve it, and as you're trying to figure out how you're going to build the product, start serving that market immediately and see where it goes.
Yeah, having been in the advertising business for a long time, there's also media planners who understand what the avenues are to reach select verticals. And that's what you're dealing with, a vertical of people who will buy gravy as opposed to, or make their own perhaps, rather than most people nowadays just buy the packets or buy something else and whip it up. You want to get to those people who are more serious about it. And sometimes a professional media planner or some researcher who will help you figure out verticals that are less expensive than broadcast, narrowcasting to those people, or using the web and search engine optimization to get a group, just like Alex said, of a list of people who are pre-qualified, so you don't have to talk to everybody. You just talk to your most likely customers. That's really the big game in advertising. Next question.
Another QR code question from Chester Sweeney in Las Vegas, Nevada. In the market for a new DVD player that goes straight into the TV, a player that plays almost any format DVD, best bang for buck and best overall quality.
Nigel DeSalle is going to help you out. Nigel?
Yeah, so I think you got a bunch of decisions, and I'm sure there are very, very expensive ones. But for about $40 on Amazon, you can get a region-free DVD player, which will work pretty well, depending, of course, what the DVDs are that you're playing or how you're playing them out, whether it needs to be more than a TV into a projection system. But I would give you two other quick thoughts to think about. One, for about the same price, you can get a DVD player that will connect to your laptop or your Mac, which will make it a little more multi-purpose, and then you can connect your Mac to the TV. And for just about double the price, you can get one that plays Blu-rays as well, so that might leave you even more protected. We actually bought a Blu-ray player with just some things we can't stream. But if you spend too much, like if you spend a couple of $100 buying a really high-end one, think about what DVDs you might have been able to buy to stream that add up to about the same amount. And there may be a break-even point where it's just cheaper to move those DVDs to the side, assuming you can get whatever the content is on a streaming platform.
Alexander Knight.
Yeah, that's good advice. I agree with Nigel about spending a little bit more on a Blu-ray player. I don't know what you mean by best bang for the buck, but the Blu-ray player that I generally recommend you start out with is the one from Panasonic, which is about $400 US. It is the DPU-B820, and this one will do all the way up to 4K. The reason why I like Blu-ray players more is because you talked about formats, being able to play anything, and this will play CDs, it will play DVDs, they often will play DVD audio discs, Blu-rays, obviously in UHD 4K. They support all the HDR standards, Dolby Vision, and they would automatically switch between those HDR standards and SDR. So this is why I like the Panasonic stuff. And then, of course, if you have deeper pockets, the flagship reference player, which is almost $1,000, which has a much higher end ESS Saber DAC and a much better designed power supply. All the components are isolated. And then, of course, the other thing with this one, too, is that it also has balanced XLR analog outputs, which is kind of cool. So you got a couple options there.
Jesse Kester.
I would not recommend getting a Blu-ray or DVD player for a Macintosh computer. Either one, you'll have a kind of dodgy experience. The Macs are not built around DVD players and tools. They have for playing DVDs, changing regions. It really gets under your skin quickly. And the Blu-ray support on Macs just isn't there, even from third parties. You might get something that works, but not a really good long-term solution.
Next question.
Jesse Kester from Glendale and here on the panel. Alexander, you mentioned not being able to downgrade an M4 Mac Mini. Are you saying that you can't wipe the hard drive and install something older like Sonoma?
Alexander Knight.
You cannot. You can't downgrade the operating system below what it actually shipped with. And the M4 shipped with 15.1, which has special code for the... In fact, there's a special... I checked into this because you can download the full installer. There is a very specific build of Sequoia for the M4 processors, and you cannot use anything other than that build for the M4.
Ooh, okay then. Next question.
Paul Valhus in Austin, Texas. What production values did you take away from the Golden Globes?
Alex, start us off.
You know, I think some of the graphics inserts I thought were pretty interesting. And again, I think I didn't see all of them. Obviously, I had to go back and look at that one. But I think that one of the things that I thought was, kind of interesting was this kind of, and I now misplaced it, but this reverse shot. So what was interesting is I think that they acknowledged that the vast majority of people that are watching this are not in the room. They are, in the past. This is the first time I've ever seen one where this is a broadcast. Like, so before it was always we're presenting in a room, and you happen to be watching the presentation, which is, it hasn't been the case for a very, very long time, 50 years, 100, 50, 60, 70 years, where you were presenting in a room and it wasn't going out to somebody else. And so what they did is they kind of flipped the script on this, which I thought at first I found it a little disconcerting, but then I actually thought that it was actually a pretty interesting thing. So when they did all the presentations, they still looked out to everyone when someone was accepting. But when they did the presentation, they built this around where they have an LED wall back here, and the person is presenting with the crowd behind them, using them as the set piece. So this is all the VIPs or whatever that are at their tables or not at their table. Anyway, so but I thought that this was a really interesting framing and process that I've not seen before, and I thought it actually worked pretty well.
Yeah, my wife and I were watching it, and we were saying a little bit the same thing. It's like, unlike working in a restaurant where you don't know whether people will be drawing focus, you have a room full of absolute professionals at the top of their game. So something like shooting the audience becomes a different thing. First of all, the people are uniformly amazingly good looking and things like that because they're the top Hollywood performers around. And they're also very disciplined in terms of their craft, so you don't have to worry about a lot of that randomness that happens when you're shooting just into a regular audience. And, they don't care. You turn the lights up on them. They're used to being looked at and things like that. So a lot of the things that go into a regular production don't count when you have a room full of the most professional people on the planet. I thought it was interesting. Seth Rogen and whoever presented with him almost commented on it saying, this is a little weird. I'm not used to being in this kind of position in the back of the room talking to a camera. But it was an indication of exactly what Alex was just talking about. It didn't look wildly different, but for those who know, it was a different kind of production. And I think Alex is exactly right. They were building this for the audience, for the cameras, to be a show. And it showed. Next question.
Jim Brooks in New York. For those of you who do drone footage, what type of insurance do you carry? Are there websites for per-shoot insurance? Thanks.
Alex.
There definitely are. You're looking for short-term film film insurance, and you can do a search and you'll find them. I have to admit that I don't have a ton of experience with it because I haven't worked in a company for 20 years that didn't just have the insurance that we needed. So I think typically we've used Hartford or Chubb are the two big ones that we've used, and we've carried. We carry our insurance generally. I mean, we just do it so often; it would be very expensive for us to do on a per shoot basis. So it's oftentimes a near weekly thing that we're sending a COI, a certificate of insurance, to someone. But one thing you want to be very careful of if you're looking at short-term film insurance is make sure that the drones are included, and you're going to want to talk to them, and you're going to want to make sure it's in writing. That liability is part of what they're covering, and in general with insurance, you have to just be very, very careful. If you're not using someone like Hartford or Chubb in the United States, any short-term one, you just got to look at what the carve-outs are. Like what are they? Especially if it looks like it's inexpensive for your insurance. It's like, wow, that's only $59 for a day of shooting. Like, what is the actual liability, and what will they? Because their job is to basically, once you actually file a claim, their job is to not pay it. so like that's the thing you just have to know. Like there's somebody's job there is to look at your
a reality check,
and that's how they make money is not paying your thing. So you want to make sure that if you're not dealing with someone that you have like a long-term relationship with, that you and then Mickey points out Athos. Athos specializes insurance for entertainment and production as well. They're the go-to for many. So Athos Insurance. So that's another one to look at. And Aaron Cody said his Cox is another one that he likes.
Yeah, if you've been in business for any length of time, you probably should have an insurance broker, and the broker is the one who will normally secure your policies from a variety of companies if you have an independent insurance broker. I used to do that, and it was the smartest thing I ever did, because when I had to pull permits for shoots and things like that, I don't have to mess with it. You just call the broker and say, here's what I'm doing, and literally half an hour later, a cert would show up on my fax machine, and I could take that to whatever client I was trying to book a shoot with and say, yes, I'm insured. Here's the policy. You're now a named insured. He took care of it for me. And it's just really smooths everything out. We were with Chubb for a long time when we were doing most of our production, and I agree. There are a few companies who really know this well, do this well, and are equipped to write things like a 1-day policy or a 3-day policy that'll cover you well and will satisfy almost any commercial property owner and give you the access to the facility. Next question.
From the QR code, Chester Sweeney in Las Vegas, Nevada. Currently, what are the top best quality and best budget 3D printers?
I do not do 3D printing, so I'm outside my area of expertise, and nobody else raised their hand.
Oh, sorry.
on this,
I thought I'd raised my hand.
No, I don't see that. Go for it, Alex. Excellent.
So it depends on what you want to do. The big thing is, are you doing an extrusion or you're doing resin? So those are the two big ones there's lots of other options, but the one that I purchased most recently that I'm using for a lot of the stuff that we're building is this Flash Forge, and I don't know if it's the best one, but it works, it works well. You can see I purchased it a year ago or a little over, or no, not a year ago, November, as I was printing some new things. My Cheedy, something's wrong with the extruder, and it was cheaper to buy a new one than to fix it. So we're going to go back and try to fix the extruder, but in the meantime, I needed to print some stuff, and I got this one, and it's been working great. So I'm using a mixture of TPU and PLA for that. So that's not very expensive. The other one that I'm looking at are things like this. This is this Elegoo is one that does resin. So you're going to get a much higher resolution out of it. So those are other things to look at. So resin, you got to decide how much detail you want and what you want it to do. If you want it to be stronger, typically the PLA and TPU are going to give you a stronger print. But the resin's going to, if you're trying to do little objects and characters and stuff like that, the resin's going to be more detailed.
And the other person on our normal panels who does a lot of 3D printing is Courtney Gooden. So if you see Courtney here on one of the days coming up and you have additional questions about that, go ahead.
And also David Brady and Jeff Simmons both mentioned the Bamboo A1, Bamboo Labs, BAMBU Labs A1. And I haven't seen that one, but now I'm going to check it out.
Yeah, it looks like a couple of David and Jeff Veely both said thumbs up on that. All right, next question.
Douglas Carmichael asks, has anyone worked with YouTube creators that participate in the Brand Connect program? I've heard that name before.
I have not seen anybody. I don't do much YouTube work. I know that there are a lot of people in our community who do, so that might be a good question for maybe a Wednesday. We have a pretty big audio audience, but I would imagine a lot of YouTubers are kind of watching there as well. Or just generally, if a question doesn't get a lot of traction on one show, that doesn't mean that the next time the show is on, there won't be a lot of people interested in that. So hang on to your question, Douglas. Come back with it on another day, and let's see if we can do that. We're close enough to my timing cue here, so I wanted to mention that if you would like to support our efforts here at Office Hours, there is a simple way to do that, officehours.com/donate. We are a 501c3. You are able to send us a gift if you would like to do that, and it will go into helping this show stay on the air every day, as we have for 1,750 plus days, I think, at this point. And it's all deductible. Check with your accountant, of course, about that. But we are a legitimate 501c3, so there shouldn't be any problem at all. And we would greatly appreciate your helping us do the work that we're here and enjoy doing every day. Let's go on to our next question.
Aaron Cody in St. Louis, Missouri says, Business Monday, I had to fire someone for the first time this year, a freelancer I'd worked with successfully for years. I think I handled it okay, but it was awful and scary. What tips do you have if firing someone mid-show is necessary?
Jesse Kester, start us off with this.
It doesn't have to be theatrical at all. It can be as polite as you're able to make it in the moment. One thing you do want to do is remove permissions and change passwords before you have that conversation, so that there's no friction after the conversation in your back end or in your pipeline or anything like that. I would give you more advice right now, but I think what you should do is go watch Moneyball, which has the best explanation of what a firing should go like, and then a nice little scene that shows it in real time. But don't go theatrical. remember you've got your own reputation that will follow you for the rest of your life, and you want to keep it as clean as possible. You can have the reasons ready if you want to, but you don't always have to give them an itemized list of what happened that led to the firing. If it's a big one with our company, we will tell them in one sentence or two sentences what the core issue was that made it impossible for us to work with them. And the other thing is, we don't do the back and forth afterwards. If they have follow-up thoughts and anger coming through an email or phone calls, we kind of let them burn those calories in solitude. We don't join them in that calorie burn. Good luck, and it hurts a lot. It hurts a lot to fire people.
Alex Lindsay.
Yeah, generally we do everything we can not to do it during a show. It's obviously a destabilizing environment to do that. So even if someone's not performing at the level that we'd like, unless they're really screwing it up, we'll tend to hang on to them. This is the big advantage of going from show to show and having freelancers, is that you just simply don't call them the next time. So that's the quiet firing that happens in production happens all the time, because most producers will be very nice to you and never say anything to you while you're on set, because they just want to keep everybody going the same direction. But they just simply take you off the list, and they take you off many people's lists oftentimes because they trade notes. And so that's what you have to be careful of as a freelancer. If you do, there's only been, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 times in my entire career after thousands of events that I've let someone go during an event because it's so destabilizing to do. In the cases that we had to, the person was outspoken. They were creating a lot of friction, ways that we felt like it was going to be more destabilizing. We did it during a break. Usually we have someone who, if it's that producer or someone that's close to them, gets them off the space to talk, and then doesn't let them back on the space. So you get them out of the area that you needed to get them out of, and then you tell them that they can't come back, and we'll grab their stuff. And it's a little rough, and people can get kind of upset with it, but again, we've almost never done it. As far as, that's the thing that you got to be kind of careful of. The other thing that we tend to be really careful of is telling people that something's not working before we let them go. If we're going to actually let them go, say, this is the stuff that you got to let, kind of set them up for, this isn't working and this has got to get fixed. And you want to do that in writing if you can.
Nigel.
Yeah, there's a huge difference between doing this to an employee, particularly in a company, and to a freelancer or somebody who is working on contract or on particular contract. And I think the guys covered it well. The only 2 things I would probably re-emphasize are, when you do it, don't just remember you don't have to explain everything there and then. You got to disengage. You got to get the person out of the way and tell them you'll deal with any reasons or explanations follow up. You can choose what you say or what you don't say, but don't ever make the scene there. And just remember, if somebody's told you something, it may or may not be true. So be really sensitive to sudden emotional responses to other things that people tell you about other people in the middle of things. The last thought I would give you is, and I like the idea of the calories, you don't have to explain, particularly in an at-will environment, exactly why you did what you did. But just remember, they're a person too, and they have emotions, and you've got to learn to live with yourself. So don't be unfair on the other side of it.
Alexander Knight.
I've only had to do this once, and the person just wasn't performing their job properly, and there were a lot of reasons that I won't get into. You know what? No matter how many times you do it, you realize it's a part of business, and you have to sometimes cut ties with people that just aren't working out well, and it never gets easy. It's never fun letting someone go. Of course, there's obviously a difference between firing someone and just laying them off because there's, you're downsizing, there's just a lack of work. That's a very different story. And in those scenarios, in both scenarios, I always take them aside privately, never dress them down in front of other people. That's just embarrassing. And then, of course, if you're having to lay someone off, I always try to give some kind of letter of recommendation, try to set them up for success and help them out along the way so they can find work again, because it's not easy.
Yeah, there are a couple of good suggestions also in the chat today. Regular meetings about performance, if possible, will help. That's if it's an employee. So it shouldn't be a surprise because you probably had them on a recovery plan or at least a look at how they're behaving and what you think about it. And then Jeff Ely says, start with, this is going to be a difficult conversation, or I have some bad news to share. Kind of gives them a chance to not get completely cold with it. It is a delicate thing, I will tell you, but it is also something, if you're going to run an organization and a business, you need to know how to do this and you need to be comfortable enough. I never delegated that. If there's somebody had to leave, whether it was from a position that I had supervisory control over or if it was on set and I was controlling the set, I always did it myself. I never offshored, sent that off to somebody else because it is hard and it's difficult for both the person getting let go and it's difficult if you haven't done a lot for the person who's having to let someone go. So a lot of politics involved in that. Alex, you wanted to add some more?
I, on the other hand, almost delegated almost all the time. so like usually if you're going to get, I almost never do it myself. I have, but you really have to pinch me hard to get me to do it. I've done it once or twice and it was rough.
It's hard.
I was pretty rough when I did it because it was a chain reaction to something that I was upset about. But it is, I think that the other thing you want to be careful of is, I take it as an expense that I should have seen it coming. So in the handful of times we let people go, we make sure that they understood that we were going to pay them for the day, and if it was a 2 or 3 day shoot, we're going to pay them for the whole thing. Like we're not trying to it's going to cut into my margin or whatever. You're going to get paid for this. We just need you to go home. And then the reason we're having them go home is because they're damaging the event, not because we're trying to save money or replace them with someone else. That they're and we but we took it very seriously, and that's when we resist it. But we made sure that we're going to make them whole, and they're not going to come out chasing after us. And we paid them as fast as we could. Oftentimes, right at the end of the event, or even when we let them go, we would just pay them right then to make sure that it wasn't something like that was a problem later in any way, shape, or form.
Nigel, additional thoughts?
Yeah, and that's a good example of a piece of advice that someone once gave me, which is make these sorts of decisions with your head, but execute them with your heart. You have to do tough things. You don't have to do them in a mean way.
Absolutely. And I used to start with, you're a very talented person and there will be things you can do. This is not working out. And maybe if there was a clear-cut, solvable way, and it's for this reason. I had somebody show up to do talent work on set and they couldn't read the teleprompter because they hadn't brought their glasses. And it was just like, that's all that's going on here. I have to let you go and I have to do one of the other 2 people who are qualified to do this. Because of this, that doesn't mean you're a bad person. It means you weren't prepared to do this work today and it's not working. A lot of good copy in here. So if you're not in the Mukana system, this is one of the reasons why you want to be in the back because the chat is really good from this. Craig McFarland noted they'll often take cues from you about how emotional they could be. And I think that's a good thing. If you're professional, under control when you're having to do this job, that sets a tone that could be very important. And there's all sorts of other chats in there. But let's move on to our next question.
Chester Sweeney from Las Vegas, Nevada, and the QR code asks, I was wondering, with all the ways to do holiday rigs and or gigs in recent weeks, anyone have any funny stories that involve tech?
Alex, did you have anything weird happen on this season?
I don't think we did. It was a pretty calm, for me. I mean, I'm figuring out a lot of things that are tech related, but I don't think there was anything that was humorous. I was trying to think of something that was humorous. I mean, the only thing that came up that was I was shooting, I think I talked about it maybe over the weekend, that on Friday I shot some 120 frame per second tests, and I was playing around with cinematic mode with my iPhone and was just floored by what I could do with it. It's not something I would use in production, but as a personal, I'm now exploring it because it's just like, wow, because it's saving so much data that you can go back, and Roz pointed out. I was like, it worked really well when I shot it, and Roz is like, oh, by the way, you can do that. You can edit that later in Final Cut. And I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah, you can reset the focus. I was amazed when I saw you clicking on the boxes and post refocusing shots to highlight somebody. That was pretty awesome. Wow. Yeah. Alexander?
Nothing personally to me, but more directed at Alex. Was it NAB where you came with that giant iPhone rig? I mean, you must have had questions and comments and people, what is this?
Well, we had a giant iPhone rig, but we didn't use it very much. We ended up just using the Sony rig, which was even bigger than the iPhone rig. So we, but we're working on a new iPhone rig that is pretty big. So stay tuned for that.
So many things. We're at the end of the show. Thank you all for paying attention and being with us today. We are going to be back here tomorrow. We are here every day exploring all of these worlds and all of the things that have to do with production and the internet and everything. This is where your questions drive everything, and we thank you for all of those. As our producers, the people asking the questions, without you, this show doesn't happen every day. And once again, you've amazed me with the depth and intelligence of your questions. So we hope you'll be back tomorrow and many other times in the future to ask and do the same kind of thing. But thank you for your contributions today. For the panelists who show up every day here to volunteer their time and do this, we appreciate your effort, your expertise, and the fact that you have a career full of understanding and wisdom that you're willing to share freely here every single day. We appreciate that to no end. And our amazing back-end crew who quietly toil all around the planet in front of their computers watching and making this possible. You can't believe the number of things. I mean, there's somebody somewhere switching the show. There's somebody monitoring audio. There's somebody doing the communication between panelists and things like that to get our questions answered. And, we need a little bit of help how to pronounce a name. Somebody will pop into our IFB or something and help us with that and do the research for this. So it really is a community effort. And if you want to be a part of that community, we highly encourage you to do that. We'll be back here forming the community again and doing it all over tomorrow. Thank you for watching. The Telect Traversal today, we managed to do 26,000 miles. That's 41,000 kilometers, 204 million bananas for scale. Remember, After Hours is always on. We'll see you tomorrow.
Good show. It's fun.
Yeah.
I'm off to another meeting. See you, buddy.